Active Preteen Ministry with my friend Sean Sweet. It is going to be a great time together. And before we get started, though, we need to start introducing ourselves to one another. Some of you have already found on the right-hand side is our chat. So if you go to the right-hand side, you should be able to see a little chat box. Go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know where you're watching from today. It's good to see Helene and Sarah on here already. You guys found it first, so congratulations. I wanted to let you know that today we hope technology works well for us all the time. You know this, I know this in ministry. Technology is awesome until it's not. So I want to give you a couple of tips as you guys go ahead and put your names in there. One, the browser you use today, if you use Chrome or Firefox, those two will work the best for you today. If at any time your feed freezes or the audio gets fuzzy, usually refreshing your browser works pretty well to fix that issue. If you're having any volume problems, go ahead and use earbuds. Those seem to work the best when we're doing webinars. And if all else fails, don't forget that you are going to get the replay of this webinar when it's done. So if you get interrupted or something happens, don't worry. You'll get the entire session once the session is over. So thanks so much for putting your names in there, friends. It's good to see you joining from Wisconsin, Jean, and Jenny from Tennessee, Shanequa, I think I pronounced that right, sorry. Ron from Ontario, good to see some of our friends from Canada joining us today. Really glad you guys are here. In order to keep you guys engaged, I want to ask a quick question here. It's a poll question coming up on the side. Is this your first time joining Incm for a webinar? If it is, go ahead and let us know. Maybe you've been to a couple, or maybe you do a ton of training with Incm. We'd love to see who's here. And we've got a good number of first-time friends joining us. So I want to just introduce myself. My name is Michaela White. I get to serve as the Executive Director for the International Network of Children's Ministry. INCM has existed for 40 years to connect children's ministry leaders to what they need. We think those three things fall into training, like what you're experiencing today, resources, and community. We believe that the children's ministry community is each other's best resource, so we're excited for you to get to know some new friends today. We love getting to provide opportunities for you to grow and get connected to what you need to help kids come to know and love and serve Jesus. And that is why we are giving you this incredible opportunity to learn from Sean Sweet today. You are going to absolutely love getting to learn from Sean. So over half of you, this is your first time joining us for a webinar. We love preteens. That's why we're here today. And so I'd love to know, coming up on the side is another question, what's your favorite thing about preteens? Is it their questions, their energy, their humor, their perspectives? They're growing so much, changing so much, and thinking deeply about things. What's some of your favorite things about preteens, or all of the above? Sometimes it's hard to choose. So most of you are going with all of the above, about 60% of you. And then the rest would say you love their questions and their perspectives. Yeah, they're thinking so differently at this age and stage. It's so exciting to get to hear the way that they're processing their faith and the world around them at this age. Awesome. Thanks for answering that question, guys. Well, in order to help out Sean, I wanted to ask one more question. So thank you for obliging me with these poll questions. But I'd love to hear a little bit about what your ministry looks like when it comes to preteens. Are preteens, for the most part, joining the rest of your children's ministry in a large group setting? Or do you have a dedicated preteen ministry with their own large group time? Or maybe it's something different. If it is something different, I'd love for you to share it in the chat so we could learn from you and hear from you about what that looks like for you. So awesome. It looks like where the poll is settling is almost exactly half and half a bit between preteens being in the large group setting with the children's ministry or having a dedicated space. It's kind of settling a little bit here. And then about 20% of you have something different. So awesome. Thank you so much for engaging with that. I can't wait to hear about what your ministries look like. I want to introduce our speaker today, Sean Sweet. Sean, you could go ahead and pop up here on this side. Hey, friend.
Hello.
Sean has 20 years of experience in education with children. He's also a preteen pastor at his church in Washington State, and he's also the director of 456, which I hope you guys go and check that out today. 456 spelloutthewords.org, and check out all of the incredible training and resources that Sean has created for you with his team for you to be able to serve preteens better. Sean, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. I'm really grateful, Michaela, for the opportunity. So thank you for having me.
Well, I'm not going to take away any more of your time, so why don't you go ahead and dive in. Friends, if you have questions for Sean while he's teaching, I'll be keeping track of them, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end, okay? Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. All right. So today we're going to talk about proactive ministry to preteens. And there's kind of two words in there that really stand out to me in that title. And one is proactive and the other is preteens. So we're going to be talking about being proactive, and then we'll be talking about preteens, and we're going to bring the two ideas together today. So I want to start with a story. It's a story of a school that had a playground that was right on the edge of this cliff. And during recess every day, kids would get too close and fall off the edge of the cliff. And so the school was like, this is a problem. And they met to discuss the problem and to come up with a solution. They had an all-night meeting. It was, kind of a late night, one of these meetings that goes all night long. They finally came up with the solution. So in the chat window, can you guess what their solution was? So just what would be your solution? Go ahead and put that solution in the chat window. And if anybody gets the correct answer, they're going to get a prize. So I'll give you a minute to type that. Again, the playground is close to the edge and kids are falling off a fence. Sherry, great answer. Let's see, any other suggestions, or is it just the fence? Fence, another idea on the fence there. Put up a fence. I'm on the fence about that answer. No, just kidding. A wall. Be there. Okay, good, Ron. Move the playground. Find a new play area. Great. Move the playground. Awesome. So the school's solution, because they were a rich school, they actually had a lot of money. And so their solution was more ambulances. That was the solution. So I bring that up because a lot of times in our ministries, we are not being super and this includes me, we're not being super proactive about problems. Instead, we're being reactive. We are solving the problem, but not necessarily reaching the highest potential available. So in that scenario, was the problem solved? Well, in some ways, sure, yeah. But in another sense, no, the problem isn't really solved because the highest potential is not being recognized. So when it comes to preteens in our ministry, you might have some strategies in place and some solutions, and you might be able to say, problem solved, check. Some of you can't even say that, and some of us can. I mean, some of us say, yeah, problem solved. But today I want to encourage us to think about a better question, and that is the highest potential for your preteens being recognized in your ministry? So Christy Skivicue is the author of a book called The Proactive Professional. And she gives these 5 P's for proactivity. In case you're like, what? I don't even know if I'm really clear on proactivity, what that means. So the first P is predict. Okay, and this means that we're thinking about what might happen instead of just reacting. So if you had a school and you built it close to a cliff, you might predict that kids would fall off the edge. So you could predict it instead of just reacting. The second thing is to set things in place to prevent problems before they occur. The third thing that being proactive means is that you are planning. Again, you're not just reacting within the situation. You're not being reactive, you're being proactive. The fourth P is participate. And this one takes a little explanation. If we're going to be proactive, that means we need to participate in the situation instead of just letting it unfold as a bystander and as an observer. So somebody suggested that they put leaders out on the playground, and that would be to participate. So in every situation, the more we can participate with the people that we are ministering to, instead of just reacting, we're participating with them, the better we are able to predict and prevent and plan and do the other things that help us to be proactive. The final one is this: perform. And what Chrissy means by perform is simply to act, to actually do something instead of procrastinating or sitting back and letting the problem persist. Instead, we are performing, we are taking action. So this is what it means to be proactive, to predict what's going to happen, to prevent it ahead of time, well, I guess that's what prevent means, to make plans, to participate, and to perform. Proactivity starts with understanding and awareness, and proactivity means that instead of simply solving a problem, we do some things so that problem doesn't exist in the first place. So the problem that we're going to be looking at today through the lens of proactivity is preteen behavior. So I want to examine preteen behavior, where that behavior comes from, and perhaps we can be more proactive with our preteens. Instead of saying, yeah, I've got a solution in place for the preteens, there's a better question, and that is the highest potential being recognized? So you guys ready for that? Let's go for it. Let's do this. This circle is going to represent a preteen in your ministry. Now, I don't want you to write their name in the chat window, but instead, I want you to think about their behavior. What is the behavior of this preteen that you are perceiving as a problem, that you are seeing and going, not good? It might be that this preteen is unengaged. And so if that is you in the chat window, you could write unengaged. What are you seeing with the preteens in your ministry that you would like? You think that there's probably something better than the way they're acting. There's something better for them. There's a higher potential than what they're behaving. So think about this preteen and put it in the chat window. Somebody already wrote they're wild and talking out of turn. Okay, what else is this preteen doing? This preteen's embarrassed. And you know, sometimes preteens will be so embarrassed that they won't even participate. Unengaged even with the other preteens. All right, what else? Bored. Yep. Boredom is pretty common for preteens in some churches. Attention seeking, lacking appropriate boundaries, growing up too fast or trying to grow up faster than they actually are, caring what others thinking. They're very busy and their mind is going crazy. I sometimes say that preteens' brains are a little bit like channel surfing. They're disrupting and being a class clown, combative. These are great. These are all great answers. Okay, keep those coming in, because that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about those behaviors and this preteen right here, whoever this is. So this preteen is behaving that way because they're not in a place where their needs are being met to the point where they don't do that. Okay, if their needs were met to a certain point, then some of those behaviors, not all of them, but some of those behaviors would disappear. So I want to do a little illustration here to kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about. So let's say that this is your children's or preteen ministry. Okay, right now, this is the program that you have. This is the environment that you have for your preteen ministry. And everybody that's here, their needs are being met. Everybody that's within the circle, their needs are being met. So if you have a children's ministries, all of your first graders, second, third, fourth, third graders, they might be well within the circle and everything is going hunky-dory for them and their needs are totally being met. The thing is, this kid is having a problem because his needs are over here. And they're outside the sphere of what your preteen ministry or what your preteen or children's ministry is doing. So you're trying to run your program here, and often it seems like the preteens are over there. Can you relate to that? Like, a lot of these things you guys are writing, that's the behavior, right? Like, we're trying to run a program and they're just joking around. We're trying to run a program and they're disengaged. We're trying to run a program and there's mild fighting with others in the room. Melinda, I see that question. The name and author, here, I'll move it forward for you. It's right there. It's Chrissy Skivic, and it's called The Proactive Professional. Okay, so this is the problem. They're too cool. This is, what they're seeing, and they're standing outside. They're standing outside of that. So what we do a lot of times, and what I've done, is I've said, hey, you're over here, the program's over here, and I try to force them to do this. I try to force them to come there. And we know that that doesn't seem to work. In fact, preteens will dig in their heels, whereas a younger kid might dig in their heels. A preteen, might be wearing high heels. A preteen might be digging in their heels a little bit harder and a little bit stronger, and may actually say, oh yeah, well, I'm actually going to go over here then. And so our program is not meeting their need, and that's causing behavior, and it's causing tension between us, the ministry leaders, and the preteen. So this strategy of saying, get with the program to the preteens, it works sometimes, but oftentimes it doesn't. Oftentimes it leads to even more behavior issues, and some of the kids who are here maybe even turn their head and see and join that kid over there. So what I want to talk today about, being proactive, is to say, how can we do this with our program? How can we take our program and expand it out to there? A lot of times, as I'm talking to people that are primarily running a children's ministry that have preteens in it, a lot of times they see the problem, but really their heart, and there's nothing wrong with this, their heart, they're wired up to really minister to the first and second graders. And this doesn't appeal to them. To say, maybe I can expand my program, maybe I can even have another program for them that's separate from my children's ministries. A lot of times it's not so much of saying, yes, that needs to happen, as much as saying there's a cost involved and I don't know if I want to pay that cost. So I want to tell you, as a church, that was really a dilemma we had. We saw that preteens needed something different than what our younger kids were having. When I first started here, we had 1st through 5th grade all together in a big gym. I started on staff here at Destiny Church in Rockland, California in 2001. And what's that? Oh, my wife is correcting me. 2003. And for the first, I guess 5-6 years, the children's ministry and the preteen ministry were all together. And we weren't really doing much as a church for our preteens. And so there was that tension that existed, the tension between the preteens' need and our program. And so we did some things to expand our program to include the preteens, and I want to talk about some of those things. And now we actually have a preteen ministry that is separate from our younger children's ministries and yet connected. We work side by side, and there's continuity between. It's not like a bunch of silos, but it is a space where preteens' needs are being met. And what we found, as we've tried to meet whatever these needs are, as our program and the needs of preteens intersect, a lot of those behaviors go away. Now, some of them don't. Some of them are actually age-appropriate behaviors, but some of those behaviors go away. And all of a sudden, preteens are flourishing. Right now, we have kids that are having a chapel time at our camp, and they're learning, they're writing, they're singing, they're engaged in talking. This week, they're talking about their, what's the word, the way people see you, what is it? Perception. Yeah, people's perception of you, that you're, I can't think of it, I'm sorry. Somebody give me the word here. I must be getting old. As I'm getting older, words are leaving my head. But that's what they're talking about, and they're totally engaged. Yes, their identity versus their reputation, that's the word. They're talking about that, identity versus reputation, and they have these masks, and on the outside they're talking about reputation, and on the inside they're talking about their self-image and their identity. And so all week, instead of having journals, they're actually writing on masks this week. So giving the preteens a chance to think about the things that matter to them that may not have mattered when they were first graders and second graders, and giving them a place to do things that they weren't even ready to do a few years ago, by doing that, you can expand your program and include them in. So where does a lot of this preteen behavior come from? A lot of it comes from their stage of life. A lot of it comes from where they are developmentally. So let me read this to you. It says this: when a baby boy is born, he is not developmentally ready to walk. One day, he'll reach an age where he's ready, except that he's not, because he's never done it before. He's ready developmentally, but not experientially. This is when we encourage the baby to walk. We hold his hand and walk him up and down the hallway. And then one day, he scoots over to an end table, stands up, and lets go. He takes a few tentative steps and falls. What we do when the almost walker falls. What do we do? Do we shake our head disapprovingly and say, "What's wrong with you? Why are you acting like that?" No, of course not. We celebrate the steps forward with claps and encouraging words. We celebrate that he's moving towards becoming a child who can walk on his own. The baby who was once developmentally unable to do something is now able developmentally, but not experientially. We celebrate the experiments. We celebrate the effort. We celebrate these things because eventually he'll stop falling down, for the most part, and start walking with confidence instead. We certainly don't yell at him to stop trying. With preteens, it's important to remember that much like toddlers, they're developmentally ready to use new functions, but they don't have the experience to know how to use these functions well. Many of us find it harder to respond with claps and encouraging words for preteens though, because they aren't just taking stumbling steps and falling on the carpet. Instead, we see preteens are challenging what we're telling them about God. They're crossing their arms and leaning against the wall during worship, and their friends are following suit. They're distracting the people around them while we're trying to communicate important truths. They're making obviously bad choices and can't give us any good reason why they're doing it. They're defending their bad choices against reason and authority. They're making obnoxious noises and smells sometimes too, and not calming down when it's clearly time to do so. Cheering on a baby who is learning to walk comes much more naturally. But what does it look like to cheer on a preteen? So my first area of learning when ministering to preteens was to figure out the art of not getting upset when they're exploring their new capabilities. This became easier as I paused and considered what it was like to be a preteen. I remember these words that a parent spoke to me one time. They said, "As difficult as you find it to be around preteens, it's often way more difficult for the preteen." So here's an equation that helps me. Think about this from a preteen point of view, okay? Their lack of experience, plus their desire to try out their new abilities, plus their disconcerting feelings about the change that's going on, plus the emotional roller coaster of hormones. That's where preteen behavior comes from. So understanding what they need to thrive developmentally and what their story is, that can help us to understand where they are. Before we can expand our program to meet their needs, we have to understand where they are. Catherine, you asked what the name of the book is that I was reading from. It's a book that I'm writing right now. So it's a book in progress. So here are some books though, and this is what I was going to say next anyways. Here's a great book that you can read. It's by Dan Scott. It's called Caught in Between. Dan Scott's book, Caught in Between. Another book is called Leading Preteens, and it's by Patrick Snow. So I'm going to repeat the formula for you that leads to preteen behaviors. Number one, lack of experience. They are ready developmentally, but they lack the experience in life. Plus, a desire to try out some new abilities. Plus, disconcerting feelings that are associated with all the change that's taking place in them. Plus, the emotional roller coaster of hormones. That's what leads to preteens behavior. There's some great research that we can do. Reading those two books that I just mentioned, the Dan Scott book and the Patrick Snow book, those are great. Also, I want to write these down that can help us understand this territory. If you Google AMLE, they did a research summary. It's called Developmental Characteristics of Young Adolescents. Developmental Characteristics of Young Adolescents. Yes, Patrick Snow's book is still available. Yep, you can still find it. In fact, they're redoing it. They are reformulating, and they're going to publish it here within the next year or two. The AMLE, their article is fantastic. Developmental characteristics of young adolescents. It's great. It takes all the research from the past like 60 years and puts it into one article. And by the way, did you know that middle schools, the middle school movement, that's really only like 60 years old. So understanding this territory where preteens are, this is a fairly new thing that people are doing. And yet there are some great, there's some great articles out there. There's some great books out there. Any of the work by Piaget on human development or Fowler, these are great things to Google and to understand this territory. Here's some other things you can do to understand this territory before you decide how you're going to expand your program and try to meet the needs of these kids over here. Human development class in college. If you haven't taken one, I'd highly recommend. Patrick Snow's book is called Leading Preteens. Okay, so human development class in college is a great idea. Also, Michaela is going to talk about this at the end, but we have a course that we're doing with Incm all about preteens. It's called Preteen 101, and we're going to have like 8 weeks together of understanding this territory and how we can expand our programs or take our programs into more of that territory. 456.org, there's a bunch of free resources there that you can look around on. Yeah, so understanding where this territory is, that's the first step. Because again, before we can predict and prevent and plan, before we can do any of these things, we need to understand the territory. Before we understand preteens, we're really just going, why are they acting like this? Why are they acting like this? So anyways, so understanding the territory, that's number one. Number two is looking at our existing structure and seeing if there's some things about it that are keeping these preteens marginalized. Are there things that we could do with the structure of our programs that would help to wrap our arms around the preteens who come? So, for example, I was talking with somebody one time and they were talking about their small groups and how the kids were just kicking each other and talking to each other during small group time. And I was going, why? What's going on? I was trying to understand. And as it turned out, they were sitting at these long rectangular tables, and the leader would sit at the end, and the kids would sit on the side. So this is really easy. If you can get rid of the table, get rid of the table. If you can get round tables, get round tables. If you can move the leader to here, move the leader to here. So are there things in your physical environment that are causing problems? Because sometimes our physical environment is over here and the preteen is over here and their needs are not being met. This morning, we finally moved our early care for our VBS from this echoey hallway to a little room where it's quiet. And it's amazing the difference in the kids' behavior. Have you ever noticed that there are not a whole lot of signs to control your behavior when you go to Disneyland? There aren't a whole lot of signs because they've created a physical environment that controls your behavior. So instead of having to have signs and people telling instructions, you can create physical environments that will control the environment for you and communicate. Okay. The second thing I would say, so number one is the physical environment. Look at what's happening in your physical environment. The second thing is your expectations. What are your expectations of your preteens? My expectations is that our preteens would go deeper and go higher than the younger kids. That as their abilities are developing, that they would use those developed abilities. The Bible says that with increased resources comes increased responsibility. And for me, I want to see our preteens, I expect our preteens to behave better and to be doing things that the younger kids will want to emulate and that we would want them to emulate doing. So having a higher expectation of your preteens can flow out of understanding where they are developmentally. So I want to pause for just a minute, and I'll come back to this paper. But I want to pause for a minute and talk about where preteens are developmentally and why it is that we can have higher expectations of them. So preteens are moving from childhood to adulthood. And one thing we know about preteens is that change is the name of the game, right? We see this physically. A fourth grader and a sixth grader, they could look like this actually standing next to each other. The fourth graders come into our ministry, and it's like we want to just stick them in our pocket. They're so cute and tiny. And then the sixth graders, their voices are changing, and they've got mustaches, and some of them are taller than me. And so we know that change is the name of the game physically. But here's what the AMLE article says. During early adolescence, youth develop the capacity for abstract thought processes through the transition to higher levels of cognitive functions, and it varies considerably across individuals. Young adolescents typically progress from logical, concrete operations to acquiring the ability to develop and test hypotheses, analyze and synthesize data, grapple with complex concepts, and think reflectively. As they mature, young adolescents start to understand the nuances of metaphor. They derive meaning from traditional wisdom. They experience metacognition. And similarly, their increased ability to think through ideological topics allows them to argue a position and challenge the adults around them. Preteens no longer accept what we're teaching them in black and white like they did when they were in first or second grade. And part of that is that their brains are allowing them to do things that they couldn't before. Imagine you wake up with a pair of wings. Aren't you going to want to try them out? I am. And the preteens, when they wake up with new abilities, and they want to try them out. Often, they step into our environments, and we say, put those wings away. We've developed a program for children, and we just need you to come and sit and be quiet, or come and help. Come and, you get to stand up front and lead the worship for the kids, which is a great thing to do. But if all we're doing is trying to pacify them, and our program is really not meant for them to spread their wings and try out their new abilities, then we're really missing the full potential of what preteen ministry can be. So I want to give you 8 strategies here in the time I have left, which isn't long. I want to give you 8 strategies to help you to expand your territory and to reach the preteens where they're at. So these 8 strategies are things that you can do in a children's ministries environment. These are strategies that you can use if you already have a preteen ministry that's separate, okay? So here are 8 things that I want to recommend that will help you to expand your territory and really reach those kids instead of them being marginalized and feeling left out. They are different developmentally. And so as we're coming to understand that, as we're coming to understand how preteens are different developmentally and what their needs are, we can expand our program. And here, let me give you 8 ways to do that. So number 1 is to give them power. Give preteens power within your ministry. Here's one thing you can do is to allow them to tell you what they would like to be taught on. And it doesn't mean you're going to do it, but allowing them to write down their topics, allowing them to turn in questions, and then actually using that to develop your curriculum or to determine the topics that you're going to talk to them about. We have a leadership program. It's called Team Ion. And as our kids demonstrate consistency in attendance, they can enter this program, and they can start to do things like run the tech booth, and they can help to lead worship, and they help with check-in. They go around and look for new kids. They stand out in front of the church and look for preteens that they can invite to come to our preteen ministry that are walking into the main church. That we give them actual power, and they get a lanyard that kind of represents that power that they now have. And so giving preteens power can actually meet them where they're at, because where they're at is needing to figure out who they are. They're starting to go, I know that I have my own thoughts about things. And when you start to give them power, and when you start to also, second strategy, give them choices, then all of a sudden, you're starting to meet them where they are. At the end of our lessons, a lot of times we will set up response stations. But we don't just give them one way of responding. We'll give them like 4 ways of responding and then say, you can choose whichever one you want. If we give a preteen one way of responding, what are they gonna do? I think you know the answer. Some of them are gonna choose that way, and others are gonna choose to not do that way. But what happens when you give preteens 4 ways of responding is now they're evaluating between these 4 and picking which one. So the kid who goes to this one here, if you only gave that one choice, that same kid might have said, yeah, I'm not gonna participate. So give preteens choice, give them power. I mentioned earlier that some people, say, hey, let's have our preteens like serve in the children's ministries. And I think that's great, but we have to remember that, I'm called to children's ministries, but that doesn't mean that every preteen in my ministry is called to children's ministries. And sometimes what we're really doing is just being creative about doing this. When we have preteens serving, we're finding a creative way to put them into our children's ministries instead of really expanding and meeting their needs. So, when I talk to people and I say, hey, what do you do for your preteens? And they say, oh, we give them leadership things. They can serve. There's ways for them to help out. And then they walk away and they just go, that's problem solved. But I don't think we're reaching the full potential if that's all we're doing. If all we're doing is giving them opportunities to serve. If there's not a leadership program behind that, if there's not other things that are helping to meet their needs, then really we have a children's ministry and the preteens are just there to help. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3 is to ask questions. Giving a chance. Oh, what's a response station? Good question, Helene. If you go to 456 and you type in the search thing response stations, you'll get a whole bunch of information. But basically, it's a way to respond to a lesson. It could be writing, it could be drawing, it could be building something, it could be worshiping. Worship can be like singing out loud can be a response station. Basically, it's anything that allows preteens to take what they're learning and respond back to what they're learning. Okay, so number 3, ask questions. Asking preteens questions can be really dangerous, but it's really good because there's a lot going on in their head, and the more we can ask them questions, the more they can process what's going on up here, and the more we can find out what's going on up there. Now, if I stand up there and I teach a lesson and I don't ask any questions, I have no idea what's inside the head of the preteen. But as soon as I start to ask questions and do number 4, listen to their questions, now I'm expanding my program into their territory. On Wednesday night, we ask 2 questions at the end of every lesson. We say, what is God revealing to you? And what questions do you have about the lesson you just heard? So they take this card and they write down their answer to those 2 questions. What is God revealing to you through this lesson? And what questions do you still have? And that is our entire small group time. They take those cards to their small group and they sit down and they talk, and they never have enough time to talk. They could sit there and talk for a long time about their questions and their questions and what God's revealing to them. Let me give you a quick example. There's a kid in our ministry, his name was Mark, and Mark was not happy to move up from the children's ministries. For the first couple of weeks, he crossed his arms and he didn't want to be there. And I can remember I think it was September of his 4th grade year, and Mark was there, and the lesson was about Jesus as a preteen, Jesus when he was 12 years old in the temple. And we did the same thing we do on Wednesday nights. We say, what is God revealing through to the lesson? What questions do you have? And they wrote their things, and they came and they sat down. And this happens to me. I had a small group leader cancel at the last minute, so I filled in. I went and sat with that small group, and there's Mark sitting there like this. And I said, okay, what questions do you guys have? And one of the kids said, did Jesus have any friends when he was a preteen? And I said, I try to answer the kids this way. I try not to answer the preteen question, but I try to engage thinking through their question. And so I said, that's a great question. Do you have any idea? And the kid who asked the question said, no. A lot of times a preteen will ask a question, and then you say, what do you think? And then they'll tell you the answer. And then you can go, that's great. But in this case, he didn't have an answer. And so I said, does anybody else have an answer? What do you guys think? Do you think Jesus had friends when he was your age? And Mark speaks up. And Mark, who never speaks up until that point, he speaks up and he said, well, I bet he didn't have a lot of friends, because people who are different, people don't like them so much. And they don't have a lot of friends. And in that moment, Mark connected with Jesus in a way that he wouldn't have through just a lesson alone. But when we make space to ask questions and to listen to their questions, I'm telling you, it was like a switch went on for Mark. Mark made a connection with Jesus that night, and he went from being the kid who was like, oh, to becoming a part of our team, Ion. Mark wanted to join our leadership program, and he did plays in 6th grade. And what's that? He didn't want to leave our ministry when he just came back this last weekend, and he wanted to stay with us. And so all it was is us expanding into his territory. And that means listening to his questions and asking him questions. Okay, number 5, interject times of energy release. You need times of energy release for preteens. There's this great book called Yardsticks. And in Yardstick, it's a former teacher, and he went through year by year. 1st grade, here's what you can expect. 2nd grade, here's what you can expect. And for the 5th grade year, he said, give 5th graders a chance to stand up and run around the building and sit back down. Even though it has nothing to do with your lesson, it will absolutely help them to focus. And we know why that is, because inside their brains, as all this change is taking place, there's a buildup of chemicals, and they need a chance to release. And sometimes just screaming ah, or running around can give them a chance to release that. And that's why preteens can be so noisy and so energetic. It's because they've got all this chemical and physical energy pent up. Their muscles are expanding, their brains are expanding, and they need a chance to stand up and stretch. So we can include this in our programs. So sometimes we'll ask a question, but instead of just asking, raise your hand if this or raise your hand if that, we might say, go to this wall if your answer is this, go to this wall if your answer is this. So they get a chance to get up and move. Worship time, we have them stand up and come to the front of the room. Small group time, they stand up and go to the back of the room. So they're moving around, and giving them a chance to be physical and move around is a great way to get all that energy out, and it really helps us to expand our program into their territory. Okay, next is giving them chances to publish. Giving them chances to publish. Response stations are great for this. Giving them a chance to say what's on their mind and to write what's on their mind. We've done things like set up a microphone in the front of the stage and said, okay, who has something that they think, as we're talking about prophets or as we're talking about encouragement, we've done this, and we've said, I want you to think for a minute about something that you think might encourage the people in this room. We're just going to step aside and let you stand up to the microphone and say it. And so we do. We give them a chance to publish. And at first the room's quiet, and then all of a sudden one brave kid gets up and comes and they publish. They say something. And all of a sudden now everybody's saying something. Okay? Giving them a chance. Next, I've got 2 left here, and then we're going to get to some question and answers. Next is to give them a space where they're known. Let them be known. As preteens are developing their personality, as they're going through this phase of life where they're discovering who they are, and they really don't know, and they're just trying out all sorts of, like, am I this, am I this? Giving them places where they're known. Our small groups, we try to keep to 4, 5, or 6 at the most. We want our small groups to be small, and we want them to be known by the kids in their group and by their leaders. We'll play games that help them to be known. There's one called Secret Identity, where we have the kids write down something about them that's true, but that might be something that nobody would guess. And then we have 3 of them come up with their secret identities, and we'll call up a 4th kid to take those secret identities and try to place them on the right person. And if they're right, then they get to do a pie in the face to the kids that they guessed. If they're wrong, then they get squirted with water or whatever. But games that allow them to be known and give them a chance, make your ministry a place where they can't just slip in hear a lesson, and slip out, but a place where they get to be known by small group leaders and by you and by the people around them. Set up your environment to include that. And finally, number 8, the 8th strategy is give them a chance to try new things. I mentioned earlier that preteens are developing new skills, and developmentally, they're ready to use them. Experientially, they are not. And so the more we can give them chances to try new things in safe environments, the better they will become at figuring out how to use their abilities for God. At 456, we have this thing called letting go of the bike. And some of you have heard this before. But when you're teaching somebody to ride a bike, there comes a point where you have to let go. When you do that, they're ready, developmentally, they're ready, but experientially, they're not ready to ride that bike. And so we let go of the bike and we run alongside. And when we do that, we're creating space for them to wobble, but it's a safe space because we're running alongside. This is what preteen ministry is. Whereas children's ministry is showing them what it looks like for somebody to ride the bike and sitting them on the bike and saying, these are the pedals and this is how this works. And that's children's ministries. Preteen ministry is creating a space where we actually let go and let them try some new things. Let them pray out loud. Let them write a mini sermon and let them play in the band. And it'll be awful, but give them a chance to do it. Give them a chance so that their experience can start to match their development. We do a thing at camp called Time with God. And you might think this is an awful idea. Here's what it is. This is actually also in the deeply rooted curriculum that 456 puts out. Our time with God looks like this. We say, we want to give you 5 minutes to go anywhere you want in this, here are the boundaries, and just spend some alone time with God. And we give them paper and a Bible. Okay? Just go and try it. Try talking to God on your own. So at the beginning of the summer, 5 minutes is about all we can do. As summer progresses, now we give them 10, 15 minutes, and they're asking for more. As we give preteens chances to expand their wings and try new things out, they're going to do awesome things for God. But as long as we're trying to say, no, get over here, get with the program, get with this children's ministries program that we have for you, we're going to have behavior issues. It's time for us to take a proactive approach to our preteens. And I really hope that through this and through Preteen Ministry 101 and through 456 and our other resources, we can really help come alongside you and help raise the value of what you're doing to your preteens. I want to finish by reading this little bit here. If a preteen walked into your ministry with wings that just grew out of their shoulder blades this morning, you can say, put those things away. This is how we do things here, and there's no room for your wings here. If you try to flap them, you might hit a person or a wall, and the wind from your wings might mess up my neatly stacked paper. If you flap those wings, you won't be allowed back here, and I'll talk to your parents about clipping them off. You got it? Or you could say, wow, those are new. How great is that? I totally believe you can use those wings to bring glory to God. In fact, we've created a place right here just for you to try those wings out. Learning how to use those wings might be tricky, especially at first, but that's okay. You'll figure this out, and we'll be right there when you need some help. Preteens walk in with invisible wings each week to our church. What will we do? They have a new ability to reject what adults say and discover their own answers. Are we going to stifle that or make room for it? Preteens appreciate more sophisticated levels of humor. Are we going to stifle that or are we going to make room for it? They have the ability now to wrestle with making their own moral choices. Are we going to stifle that or make room for it? They have a new desire for independence and autonomy. Are we going to stifle that or make room for it? At some point, I had to let go of my daughter Savannah's bike when I was teaching her to ride, or she would have never learned to ride that bike on her own. Preteens are at an age where developmentally, but not experientially, they are ready to start taking ownership of their faith, their relationships, their spirituality, their lives. At some point, we must let go and let them take ownership of their Christianity. That means we create ministries where they are allowed, or even better, encouraged, to use their new mental, physical, social, and emotional abilities to discover their own walk with God. It also means that we expect some serious messing up as preteens stumble forward into ownership. It means that we cheer for the 2 steps forward rather than scolding them when they fall. It means that we're ready to dust the preteen off when they seriously mess up, smile at them reassuringly, and say, "Want to try that again? You got this." Thank you so much. And I know Michaela's going to come back on and give you some information.
Wow, Sean, thank you so much for that. I'm amazed at how much you fit into 45 minutes. Thank you for that.
Hopefully we'll have some time for questions.
We do have some time for questions, and we have some really, really good ones. So Anne asked, do you have any suggestions for dealing with an imbalance of genders in a preteen group? So like if you have way more boys than girls, do you have any suggestions for how to handle that?
Pray. What's the imbalance? We've had both. In fact, I was just looking at our numbers for camp, and we have 23 girls and 44 boys signed up for our week-long camp. So it's interesting, though, because they both respond. Boys and girls both respond to these things here.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the girls, you want to give them more choices of interacting, more choices of social.
Yeah.
But the boys, more chances to be physical. But there are girls who love to be physical, and there are boys who really respond to being able to sit and talk with you as well.
Yeah.
So the more you give choices, the more that will kind of sort itself out.
Okay.
Just keep those things in mind. Keep gender in mind as you're coming up with your choices.
Yeah.
And like going, okay, what might a 5th grade boy, how might they want to respond? Or how might a 6th grade girl want to respond? And making those choices for everybody to choose from.
That's good. That's a great point, that providing multiple choices is a great way to address that. Thanks, Sean. Let's see. Another question
I'm sorry. Let me just say this real quickly. With that, Michaela, we do separate our boys and girls for small group time.
Yes.
We didn't for a long time.
Okay.
And so on Wednesday nights, when we have our consistent small groups, we do separate them out. It gives them a chance to not have to deal with some of those dynamics in their conversations and things. But then on Sunday mornings, our small groups, they choose where they sit, and sometimes they do sit in mixed gender groups if they want to do that.
Okay, good to know. Do you have any ideas for helping preteens fit into a corporate intergenerational worship service?
Yes.
So, likely Sunday mornings,
Yeah. So if you've ever, I think most people have probably experienced this. You go to a restaurant and they have a kids menu, but it doesn't just have the food, it also has activities. So we did this for a season with our preteens because we were under construction, and we gave them, I found out like what the lesson was going to be taught, like the main points, the songs, those kind of things, and gave them ways of engaging that was like a menu. It was like this thing, and they came and turned it in after service for a prize. And so they came and turned it in, and I knew a church that actually did this intentionally because they wanted to help bridge that gap. And so once a month they would do that, and then afterwards they would process together what they experienced in the big church together, using this kind of kids menu thing as a way of processing it.
That's
so
great.
Being creative with activities and engaging them on their level.
That's good. I love Evelyn's question. How would some of these systems work for a small ministry? So, for example, she currently has 1 child in children's ministry and 2 preteens. So how do you start and maintain systems without numbers to support it? She doesn't want to overly challenge the child in her children's church, but she also doesn't want to leave behind her preteens, or she's not her preteens. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's the one room schoolhouse. That used to be the model, and of course it still is in some rural communities where you only have 1 kid or 2 kids, and you need to put them all together. I think the thing that education has figured out is that even if they're in the same room, they have different needs, and so if you've got 3, next year it's going to look different, and hopefully those 2 would start bringing friends, but or all 3 of them would start bringing friends. But as you develop a program around the 3 that you have, And again, giving choices that will keep these two in mind and this person in mind. I think there's a way of doing it. It is tricky in that situation. So I think you just have to be flexible, and your program has to look different next year, anyways. I mean, even our preteen ministry, it looks different based on the number of who our kids are.
Right. Okay. Sherry, yes, everybody watching today will get the replay, and you are welcome to share that with your teachers, your volunteers, your team members, whoever. Feel free to pass that link along. And then last question, Sarah is wondering, would much of this content also apply to early teen years, like a confirmation ministry age group, 8th and ninth graders?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have this curriculum that we've developed, the deeply rooted curriculum, and it's around these 8 ideas and how putting together a program. And we've had at least 2 churches that use it with up through 8th grade.
Okay.
And I was concerned that I thought, yeah, this isn't gonna. But as it turns out, preteens, they seem to be more like older kids than younger kids in a lot of ways in terms of what they need developmentally. So yeah, I think a lot of these strategies would work. They are moving into different territory as they're headed towards later adolescence, but a lot of these strategies will work.
Awesome. All right, my friends, I wish that we could spend more time in questions with Sean, but if you would like more time with Sean and learning from him, I wanted to share a little bit more with you about the course that he mentioned. We've been really excited this summer to be partnering together on building this Preteen Ministry 101 course through INCM's Children's Ministry Certification Program. I put a link up there on the side for you. If you click on that, it'll take you to a page that will give you a little bit more information about what this course is going to look like. Over 8 weeks, it's a 8-module course completely online. You will be able to understand what makes the preteen years unique from a development standpoint, grasping some methods to use in ministry to younger, why those methods used in ministry to younger and older kids aren't as effective with preteens. You're going to master at least 5 strategies that work well in ministering to preteens, and comprehend how to design and begin a preteen ministry, as well as engaging practical teaching techniques and understanding how preteens step into faith ownership. So there is a lot of content that Sean is going to be covering in this incredible course. It is, like I mentioned, completely online, completely approachable, doable across multiple devices. And today we are giving you, because you're joining us through this webinar, a coupon code there that you can see, webinar VIP. If you enter that when you check out, it'll take $10 off your enrollment fee. This course launches on September 9th, and it goes for 8 weeks. And we would just love to have you join us for that. If you feel like there is more that you want to dig into in creating a proactive preteen ministry, then this course is for you. Sean, there is a question about when your book is coming out. Do you happen to know that date, or do we just need to stay tuned?
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
All right.
But listen, I do want to say that if you are really, wanting to engage with the preteen ministry community, 456 is a place to do that. And we have a weekly newsletter. Well, it hasn't been weekly in the summer because of VBS and stuff. But we do have a way of connecting you there, and we give you a free 4-week series and an event you can use with your preteens when you sign up for that. And if you just go to 456.org, the little thing will pop up, and you can click on the newsletter to get that. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Well, friends, we are right at the hour. So thank you so much for joining us today, Sean. We really appreciate
My pleasure.
your investment in us. And friends who are watching, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to dig into this content with us. We appreciate you so much and believe that you are doing some of the most futuristic and strategic ministry of the church. And so if there is anything we can do to serve you better, to pray for you, encourage you, get you connected to what you need, please don't hesitate to contact us. That's what we're here for. And just know that we are praying for you as you go. I hope you have a great rest of your day, friends. And Sean, I'll see you later, friend. Thank you so
Michaela,
much.
thank you. Thank you for your heart of service, Michaela.
Thank you. Bye, guys.